Welcome to the Frequency Ma podcast with Sheena Israel and Alyssa Ma. Frequency Ma is a sanctuary for the oracular and the ordinary. We explore the interwoven paths of mothering, embodied business and prosperity, self-creation and relationship, spiritual technologies like channeling and frequency keeping. Expect earth and insights to catalyze your quantum leaps. For the multi-dimensional, multi-passionates, all of you is welcome here. Journey with us. Here we are. We're back already with episode 5 of the Frequency Ma podcast. And today, Sheena and I are joined by the blossoming, nectarous, cosmic bombshell, Hannah Jenkins, also known as Hannah Vara on her Instagram and other social handles. And while she's certified in a variety of modalities, such as cosmic sexuality, orgasmic meditation, and Baptiste yoga, she's also an OTC certified life coach. The real lifeblood thread of her work is Eros. I can't mention your name without mentioning Eros and the erotic. And Hannah is in her digital avatar and her expression online really maps the spectrum of feminine power, and that she shares about topics like erotic alchemy and embodied gnosis, organic architecture, and facilitates the feminine expression of Eros in all of these different forms. But she's also a meme ministress on Heartbeat Collective, which I just adore that account and encourage others to follow for meme medicine. And yeah, it's fantastic to dive into your work through those different mediums. Hannah stands for this kind of exquisite esoteric platform where she is in her work truly facilitating the embodiment of heaven on earth and helps women to co-create with God, to experience a real intimacy with life and their own creational alchemical font of Eros. She works with women one-on-one through her Voxer mentorship, also curates group containers. I've been in a number of spaces where you've held women's circles, and it's just such a nourishing and empowering space to be in with you. And we will link in the show notes how to work with Hannah and where to find out more. But without further ado, I want to invite you into a conversation around polarity, which is kind of become a bit of a mainstream kind of relational paradigm. When folks are seeking to integrate lessons of spirituality and bring them into their sacred relationship, whether that relating is with the self or with others, this seems like an easy kind of place to end up. And I know your teachings differ from that paradigm, and I would love to invite you into just describing like what is polarity as it has been a la Data and John Wineland, that kind of space, and then how do your teachings differ from that?
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for that lovely introduction, and I just cherish this moment of getting to drop in with both of you. What is polarity? So, well, let's start by I'd love to just say like there's like this organic truth that polarity is, right? And then there's like the convoluted, diluted teachings that are now very popular, and you can't miss them, right? It's like, oh, I'm gonna do this and he's gonna be in his masculine, or I'm gonna be in my feminine, and it's like, all right, so to start more broadly, and then I know we'll spiral in. I see polarity in its organic essence as like electromagnetism, and every human being has an electromagnetic field, which to me is evidence that we have these two inner polarities. And then when we're talking about And I'm only going to speak for man-woman relationships because that is my gnosis. And I trust other people to locate themselves if that's not the style of relating that they choose. And the idea is that, and I love talking about it, and the way that inner union and outer union, right, mirror. And so knowing that we have this this magnetic core and this electricity that runs through our being, and then we emanate, radiate an electromagnetic field. This is also called our aura. And to me, union is the shared aura. It's an auric field that holds both of you. So it's like the more you have of each pole, the stronger that field of energy is. So there is value in understanding polarity. And I would say, I just like to get it out of the realm of like masculine and feminine energy to a certain extent, because to me it's so convoluted. I remember one of my favorite posts from like a couple of years ago. I was like, can we just stop talking about masculine and feminine energy? No one knows what this means anymore. Like, we can talk about Eros, we can talk about logos, we can talk about what I find really important and essential, and I encourage all women to understand, is like how men's brains and women's brains are different, how the male nervous system and the female nervous system are different, right? And actually the spiritual purpose of incarnating into one body or the other is a different path, right? And so it's so important to acknowledge this. And then there's, as with many spiritual truths and teachings, right? Because the majority of people on the planet at this time their consciousness is at a place that wants to take things and extract from them and use them and make them dogmatic, right? Make it into a doctrine so that they can continue to outsource their own knowing to this prescribed template, right? So that has happened with polarity and its organic essence that we've now somewhat touched on. And, to me, it just feels like we miss a lot of the richness that's available when we make something prescriptive and when we like sort of have this external rubric. And so all of my work is about reorienting women so that we're seeking internally before we're seeking externally. We're looking inside for what feels true before we're asking anything outside of us. And so the way that organic architecture in alchemical union talks about polarity is that a lot of it is along these bioenergetic, physiological reality tracks, right? That we have domains within the partnership, because, and I'm going to come around to Eros in just a moment, but Eros really, or right now, Eros really cares about efficiency. It doesn't really care about these mental constructs of like what's good and bad and right and wrong. It's actually just like what's efficient and how does energy flow. And so it's efficient and energy. So it is efficient to have domains in union. And often these domains are running along these tracks of bioenergetic physiological reality, the difference in brain, the difference in nervous system, the difference in the spiritual path for each body. And it's also more so along the domains of unique genius. And one place I see this is, it's like the idea that the man is the planner. And I'll just say in my relationship, like, I love planning our trips, and like it brings me joy. It does not bring him joy. So it's like, why would I have him because he's the man? And I've heard from these teachings that like the man is supposed to be the planner. Like, why would I have him do that when I actually love to do that and he doesn't? So it's like break the mold, break the rules, and like discover what's true for yourself within that, and then stay out of each other's domains. Like that is what is so deeply important. And that's where the efficiency piece comes in, because two people trying to do the same job is like so much energy is squandered in that process. So being with someone who you can really trust to own their domain, and you can actually really surrender to them owning that domain so that you can have more, like a stronger electromagnetic field that is your shared union. I also have called this the third body.
Mhm.
Because it's, especially when it comes to sexual energy, this being this like vital current, it's the it's one of the strongest forces in our body. And when you share that and you cultivate that together, you're reinforcing this shared electromagnetic field. So that I think I've touched on quite a bit. And so I just want to say that when it comes to these like more mainstream polarity teachings, and again, Eros cares about efficiency, and I would say this perfectly mirrors what I teach at a more spiritual level. Of it's like, you don't need to use polarity to manufacture desire.
Mhm.
And if you're working with Eros, what I've come to again and again is like, you can just go directly to desire. It's so absurd to try and like create desire by like you behaving this way so that he behaves this way. And then it's like, oh, you want to like come together more. And it's like, actually, desire is ever present. And I just would love for everyone to know that your life will be so much better, so much more full of joy and play, and you'll have such an abundance of energy if you can actually drop into the truth of the desire as it lives now in you, as opposed to trying to generate this force of attraction. Because desire, and this is also where I would say Eros to me is the eternal energies of love and truth meeting in the dynamic current of life. So life is in perpetual ecstatic motion. God is this eternal principle. And God through life, right, is like this current of Eros is where love and truth are like colliding as we go along in this ever-changing, perpetual ecstatic motion.
Yes.
We say yes to that desire that's already fulfilled within us because it's inside, right? It's like we are being led by that desire, by the current of God flowing through us, and it is more powerful than anything that we can manufacture from outside of us, and it's lasting. It's like, it's, as you said, ever present, but it's expansive beyond this idea of like abundance and expansiveness beyond like more money or whatever. It's expansive in the sense that it never dies. It continues to grow and grow and grow. And yeah, speaking my language, sister.
Yeah. I would say if desire wants anything for us, it's for us to know ourselves without limits. And that's why it's often deeply confronting, right? And it's really so often, I often say like desire is about the path. It's not about the destination. And the more we can learn to linger in that gap between when we feel a desire coming to animate our vessels and move us in a direction and attaching it to anything external, right? That is where that is where we have the most energy actually available to us for creation.
Beautifully said.
I'd love for you to speak into your thoughts on truth and desire a little bit more, actually, because you mentioned truth there, and I feel I don't have a direct question, but if there's anything more that wants to come up through you, I would love to hear more. How does that feel for you when you are encountering something from within yourself that feels true and you can connect it with desire?
The first thing that comes up when I hear that is, to me, it feels really important to honor precisely this location of being human. And when I say like truth and love are these eternal principles, right? We do get to know them directly inside of our being. And when we encounter them in the world, we're encountering a transmission of the eternal through something that is perpetually dynamic. And so I would say, when it comes to, because any question about knowing truth is a question about discernment, right? And to me, discernment is something that comes from knowing resonance in your own body, right? It's not about something that can be fact checked necessarily, or quite likely not, but having a felt sense of how truth resounds in your own being, I do believe is the single greatest mode of navigation we have for being in this realm. And so to me, this is, oh gosh, I haven't thought about this in a long time, but it might be very valuable for someone listening. I had a practice when I was really working on this, gosh, it must have been like 2018 or 2019, of like just saying, like, being in a sanctuary space within myself and saying, like, God, let me know when you're there. And I would feel these tingles, I would feel these chills. And I actually have come to know so many people who are like, yes, I get like goosebumps when it's true, or like I call them truth bumps, and it's like, let me know how I can recognize this felt sense. And of course, there's like a whole vein of like, you must be in your body to be able to navigate the world this way. And one of the things that I know is that felt sense, that ability to discern is everything. Because especially when you're actually, because a lot of people have a lot of trouble just getting into right relationship with the fact that everything is constantly changing, right? That this reality is not static. We have such an intensely conditioned mind to be like sorting out things. This is this goes here. I'm going to find the right formula and then I'm going to just coast on it, right? And an erotic practitioner is like, I will never be coasting, because I know that it's always changing, and my fidelity is to tracking the truth as it changes. And sorry, not the truth as it changes. It's more like the spot of where love and truth meet is always changing, because we are meant to evolve. And so we're meant to be pulled by this thread, or if you don't like pulled, guided, led by this thread. Because we can't change where the truth is or what the truth is. And the beginning is like accepting what's true, what's so. I say all the time, nothing changes without approval. Nothing changes on a deepest level until you accept that it might not change. And I was just speaking to a client today of like a difficult relationship or a challenging relationship, and like really letting go of that other person ever changing, and how she can make that challenging relationship her dojo for her own soul's evolution, right? And in one day of her showing up differently in that way, the other person had a massive opening. And it's like, yes, because when we're in an argument, and I love that this maps right on relationships, but it's also our relationship with life. When we're meeting life with an argument of like, it should not be this way, it will not change. But if it's like, okay, it is this way, this is skill building for me at a soul level in some kind of way, right? And you can get into that kind of relationship with like, it's not wrong as it is. Then you can like, then a world of possibilities opens up. And so when it comes to desire, I would say, this is not popular, but like, you can only play in the realm of desire when you are, this is probably one of the posts you were saying, Sheena, where I got some pushback of like, you can only play in the realm of desire if you are not in attachment or if you're not in the realm of need.
It's the one. I remember, yeah. Yeah. It's so funny too, because like in that one in particular, I remember reading it and I'm like, yeah, she gets it.
Can you speak into that? I think that this is the thread that we've kind of very lightly woven through prior episodes, but this idea that, you know, we, in our relationship to God and our relationship to creation, that there's this kind of petition style of prayer where we're like, we have to be so centered in our need in order to manifest what we desire, when, you know, we're kind of, you know, in this space of a kind of, you know, puritanical conflation of this dynamic movement of Eros, you know, through our being and the ways in which creation actually occurs. And I think this is where your, I guess, both the concept of embodied gnosis as well as organic architecture kind of are doorways into discerning the difference between acting from need and from desire. And I'd love to hear you speak into the realities that manifest through those two different ways of being.
I love that. And I need to, I'll share with you after, like the fact that you just said windows is so magical. I just love that you chose that word. It's really perfect. The way I see co-creation with God and with life, life being the dynamic expression of God, is that, and I'll speak about the mystery too, and this is really important in my work too, is the way that we come into relationship with the unknown. And that's where we become fortified in our faith and fortified in our trust. And when people are in the realm of need, most of the time there's not that trust has not been fortified. There's a drive towards certainty, which also goes with what I was saying about the mind really likes to like find these fixed constructs and like believe that it can set it and forget it in all these places. Right. And I want to also say there's nothing like, I'm not saying you don't have needs. What I'm saying is relate to life and to your partner and to your friends from a place that's being fully responsible for your own needs. You liberate them to be on their own journey, right? And this is something else that we've talked a lot about in Triunity Temple, is like, how do you live karmically lean? And we've talked a bit about the Eros being predominantly concerned with efficiency. So it's like energetically lean and then karmically lean. And when we're trying to impose our will on someone else, we're actually accruing karma for ourselves, right? So, and this is where organic architecture gets really cool, because it's always about mutuality. It's always about like, if it's good, it has to be good for me, to be good for you, to be good for us. And so, you know, you don't want to control people because it's actually not good for your own karma, first and foremost, right? And so when we relate to, I'll just keep it at the level of like other people and like our friends. And there's an important piece about adulthood here, right? Because children really can't meet their own needs. And that's what differentiates a child from an adult. And yet most people in this world are living as children, right? And not children in like they've made the journey and reclaimed innocence within them, right? But actually children in the sense that they don't know their own yes and no, or they don't hold themselves accountable to yes and no. And it's actually, you know, as a erotic player, they're not really safe people to play with, because those are the people who will pedestalize you, project on you, say afterwards that they weren't a yes, right? So there's a level of adulthood that's like, I can actually consent. And to consent, then I need to know my own yes and no and be responsible for that. And so being responsible for having our needs met is knowing, like, yes, we all need connection, but it's not, in my opinion, good play to demand that one other person external to you be responsible for that need of connection. So you get to honor that, like, there's a nutrient that requires other human beings. And it's your responsibility to ensure that you have community in your life, so that it's not one person, right? Even in a divine union or something, that this one person is not the sole way that you get that need of connection met. And so that's about needs. And then when you operate from that ground, that playing field, right? Then, and now I'll broaden this to like our relationship with life, right? If I have this idea that I need something, and I talk to God, the universe, whatever, I think a lot of people in this vein would call it the universe. I need this thing, money, a new, like a partner, whatever. There's a big difference when we speak from like being already whole and complete within ourselves, right? To me, that's knowing that we're responsible for our own needs. It's like, and we're in this realm of desire, it's like without the attachment, and specifically without the attachment to the form that our mind thinks it needs to arrive in to be the thing that meets that desire. And so bringing back around this piece about the mystery, right? I love to be surprised and delighted. I love when life and God and source brings me something beyond what I wanted, right? Because our minds are limited. Our human minds are limited. And so you can place an order from your own limitations, or you can open up and be available. Like, this seems like it would be great, but something better, I welcome. Something like, and so like I often am just like, you know, I don't think that I actually know the best way that I could be enlivened, right? I actually just want to be available and an active participant in it unfolding. So the destination is not as fixed. Like, I do think it's so important to have a clear vision, and then holding that, and this is paradoxical, like remaining tethered to the truth, and like having a sense of that vision, being able to like intend, right, for that, and leave room for the mystery and for life to bring something that is delivering that in a form that's not what we thought.
It's so much more magical when we allow that to happen within us. And it does feel oftentimes like a muscle to practice. I feel so here for it, because in, even in my own life, I have just, my own examples of like how what was provided for me through that opening was not anything I could have. My mind could not have perceived it. And it was so much better. It was so much better, and still so much better. It wasn't like, oh, I got this cool new shiny thing and I get to play with that. But it's the expansiveness of that came from a truth that needed to be fulfilled. It came through a truth of being resourced by true abundance, and therefore it continues to give through me. It doesn't stop, and it's beautiful. And I feel that that's when we can witness that in our own lives and in others, we can more easily let go of like that holding on to the outcome or the attachment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can ground this in a particular way too, where it's like, because what we're talking about is having trust in the innate intelligence of life itself. And one of the ways that we can see that, there's just a myriad of examples of that innate intelligence in nature. And that same innate intelligence thus lives in our body because we are nature. And yet, one of the experiences, and again, this is going to come back around to orgasm, like, because orgasm is fundamentally an experience of letting yourself go out of control. And there's so much resistance to that, right? Like, we don't want to go out of control. And it's not often conscious, but like the reason that sexual energy is such a healing force is because it's the ignition of the involuntary systems of our body. And it's like, we don't do the healing ourselves if we actually can get this mind out of the way. And of course, there's like physical elements and things that we can do that get us more out of the way. Like, stop. It's sort of like, stop interfering and you'll self-heal, right? Like, your body has the innate intelligence to heal itself. You just need to get out of the way, or like remove these things that are interfering with that process. So when we, like, to me, that's why like orgasm, sex, all of these things are such a fertile training ground. And I'm so grateful to be on a private platform where I can like speak about this. Just having a moment right now, like, oh, I can say sex. Because that's where we get to like actually go out of control, ignite the involuntary in a certain way. And I'm not talking about like orgasm as in like that one moment of climax, but orgasm as like the experience of being out of control itself. And this is how you can actually live in an orgasmic state. I live in an orgasmic state because I'm not trying to live in control.
Mm.
And I trust this innate intelligence. And, you know, Clay has so many, like his journey with this. And because I do believe that one of the primary ways that men relate to the mystery is through women. Like, women have a lot more direct contact with the mystery, and men in a certain way, not 100%, but significantly, a significant quotient of the way they relate to the mystery is through women. And so there's so many moments, right, where I would have a desire or an intuitive hit that made no sense. And it was like watching him over the years just be like, wow, every time we listened, it paid off. Every time we didn't listen, we suffered the consequences, you know? And he's just like, okay, I no longer care if it makes sense. We're just going to go with it, right? Like, so that's been beautiful to watch. And one of the reasons that I'm so big on feminine maturity and feminine responsibility is because I do believe that part of our role as women is to initiate men into trust in the mystery, or not even trust in the mystery, but like we can lead the way in going out of control in a certain way that then they get to share in that experience. Because, and that brings us to another interesting conversation in the polarity world, right? It's like, oh, does the man really lead? You know? And that's where I have kind of come out a bit like, you know, these some of these people out there saying that women need to submit to men and never show disrespect, and if they do, it's emasculate. You know, it's like some of these tropes that like men are telling women how to behave. I do come out against a little bit. Because it's very different. Like, the important conversation that needs to be had there is like, is the man leading from his ego? Right? And what I'm interested in is God leading both of us, and God speaking through one or the other of us more clearly at different times based on the situation.
I love that you're responding to questions that I am like subtly formulating and just I've got yeah, it's perfect. One of the things that I feel like we could spiral into is, this idea of surrender, because it feels like it's a term that's so used in these spaces, but it's directly related to what you're describing in the orgasmic state. Like when we are committed to living in the orgasmic field, we must be in a state of surrender, and yet there is an active element to surrender. And like what is the role of self-responsibility and trust in occupying a state of, what are the conditions that are required for us to be in a state of surrender?
The first place that I felt to go here, because I think it rounds out this conversation with another important element, is that of safety, and like the question of safety. Because safety, it relates to this piece about needs, it relates to this piece about surrender, it relates to this piece about trust. And to me, safety is a foundational piece. So I would like say that when we're talking about having our own needs met, that includes a certain amount of physical safety. External safety is only ever relative. Nothing's guaranteed, right, in this life. It could end tomorrow. We don't know. And so, and that's again like intimacy with the mystery. There's an initiation into intimacy with death that's required. And so to me, when we're talking about inner safety, there's this way that first inner safety is knowing that you are held by your creator, and that you have a direct line of contact to God within you that is ever present. And then as far as how it unfolds in the world, it's really about knowing that you have your own back. And what I mean by that is that knowing, and by knowing, I mean like this is my commitment and my devotion to life and to God, is that whatever happens, it will evolve me, right? If it's like just some super crunchy thing, like I'm going to mine that experience for the pearls of wisdom, for the gold, because I'm an alchemist. So it's like, to me, safety is knowing that you are an alchemist. That is the safety piece for me. And so when we have this ground, because safety would go in the thing that you're responsible for. It's like you bring your inner safety with you. And it's true that there's an amount of safety required. Like a woman's body doesn't orgasm unless she feels safe. So like there's this piece of inner safety. And then of course there's relative environmental safety. I'm not in an orgasmic state, right? If something happens and I'm in like a fight or flight response, or any sort of trauma response, it's like if something happens, like I'm in a car and something scary happens on the road, right? It's like, oh, take a few breaths, come back, right? And be like, okay, like I am safe again. I do have my own back. I am like resting back into God. That's the posture for me, is like actually so much of it has to do with resting back into God and resting back into this current of life that is beyond the scope of my limited mind. So can you re-ask the question? Because I felt like I needed to go on that riff about safety, but then I know you asked something more specific than that.
Well, I can even kind of weave in another element that I was wanting to ask you. Sheena and I were talking, before the pod about your concept of feminine spine and its relation to boundaries and the no. And I feel like there's, a beautiful window of connection in like contemplating what does it mean to have feminine spine, and then on the other hand, what does it mean to surrender? And so
yes.
Okay.
What is the role of surrender? Yes. So feminine spine it's a particular architecture that I got really clear about, or it was revealed to me in a prophetic way. um, that like, because I noticed this whole phenomenon of women seeming to believe that like if they were being direct about something, or if they were like having a firm boundary, or like any sort of like penetrative quality, that meant they were in their masculine. And I was like, you know, I don't think that that's correct, and I don't think it serves us to think about that, especially when this whole like polarity dogma that we've already covered somewhat is like really having women be afraid to be in their masculine. Like, oh gosh, if I go into my masculine, I'm gonna repel my future partner, right? Like that's really getting into people's psyches in a pretty corrosive way. Um, and so I was like, okay, like let's just get really clear about the architecture through which we can bring through truth, bring through discernment, bring through clarity, right? Without fear that it means that we have now gone into our masculine and we're going to repel men or something like that, right? So feminine spine, and more recently I've been speaking about this as like our vertical pillar, which is because as humans, I see us as integration, like walking integration portals for like the mother and the father, for the material and the immaterial, for the frequency and the form, like the electric and the magnetic, right? We are walking, breathing, singing, dancing, living life portals of integration. And you can even see this as like the magnetism of the earth coming up through our feet, and just like plants, right? And then the sun coming down, right? And they meet inside of us. And again, electromagnetic fields. So when it comes to feminine spine and the vertical pillar, to me is like the being rooted and tethered to the mother and the father. And when you have that, there's a oh, and I love because you brought in boundaries and standards, and this is so important. Because I used to like really teach boundaries as like they're things that you need to be very explicit about. And there's a paradox where it's like once you have learned how to be really explicit about your boundaries, your frequency starts to hold them for you. And so, we talked about how like within union, there's this like fortification of the third body. Well, within yourself, when you fortify this vertical pillar, right, that fills your frequency field. It saturates it in God, in the beloved, in such a particular way that like that is your boundaries. And so that architecture does hold your boundaries for you to some extent. And knowing that you have your own back being a fundamental tenet of inner safety means that you will speak up, right? And this is why it's like, yeah, sure, there's not like external safety is only ever relative. And part of how you have your own back is you make adjustments in your environment. You speak to them if something's not okay, or like even something so simple as like, it's too cold in here, right? Like I'm uncomfortable, right? Because sometimes people will take this whole responsibility conversation and be like, I just have to suffer and not change the external at all. And like, I just have to figure out how to warm myself within my own being, right? And it's like, no, it's like both channels, both directions. You get to ask for things to be adjusted for your comfort and safety in the external. And that is a feedback loop that you have with yourself and life that reinforces your inner safety, because it's a way that you're having your own back. So, so surrender, there is that safety piece that is essential. And then if safety is this ground, right, then this playground of desire on top of this ground of safety, this ground of needs, right, this other field that we've been talking about that you get to play in, is trust, right? It's like from safety to trust. And so when you're in trust, you're in surrender, Like, or when you're in trust, surrender is very natural. I think that does that cover that?
So good. I'm wanting to send my the hand clap emoji or whatever like over and over.
Love too that little bit there, how you were just giving an example as well as to what responsibility to your own creation looks like. Simply with this, having that feedback loop with the example of like asking for it to be a little warmer or whatever that was. It's you don't have to suffer through it. You do. That is an act of taking responsibility for your co-creation with the universe by simply speaking into a need and knowing that because that is a true need, it will be fulfilled because the universe wants you to be fulfilled. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here.
Yeah, and I would say even if the adjustment didn't get made, you still within yourself are operating in integrity with your yes and no. So it's like even if it's like, no, we can't close the window, or no, there's no blankets or whatever, but I will say, like, if I ever brought something like that to Clay, the person who's for you, so I love that you said this as the universe, right? They're gonna want, like, and I really believe from everything I've seen with men that like they really want to succeed with us, and our role as women in a huge part is setting them up to win, because they want us, they share in our joy and our delight, and they want to be deliverers of that. And we can't expect them to read our minds. So yeah, there really is this piece where it's paradoxical, because so many women I know, they're just like, oh, I just want him to read my mind, and I want him to surprise me with flowers, and like, they never say anything about it, right? And like, I've told this story a few times, but it's so magical to me. Like, I used to wish that Clay would compliment me on my appearance more. Like, I just like wanted someone who's like, oh my gosh, babe, you look beautiful today, whatever. And it just really wasn't something that was natural for him. And like, I was like, I tried being like, hey, could you like do this more? It would feel really good. And then he started doing it because I asked, and I was like, oh, I hate this. No, stop. And then like a year later, all of a sudden, it's just like effusive from him, from his own being. And it's like, I know that it's my energy that changed, right? And again, it's like our attachment to something blocks it in a certain way, or like our attachment, because I don't necessarily love the language of blocks, but like our grip, this is an easy way to understand it, right? If we're gripped to something, then we are physically contracted. So we're not in a posture that's open and receptive. So when we communicate about, like, so I always say it's like you build the muscle of communication for however long you need to. And then what I found is like you just go more and more telepathic, right? Frequency is our original language. Like there's less, and like you have to go through the like painstaking, clear communication to build the skills to then play in this realm where it's like you really do feel each other energetically, and less conversations need to happen. But if you don't have the facility, right? And then this is also why it's like, if you want something, how often have you wanted something and then you get something that is actually more of like a lesson that prepares you to receive that thing rather than the thing itself, right? It's the same phenomenon where it's like you have to have the skills to then be able to go beyond into this other realm of play. But you can't just skip to that. You can't just skip to reading each other's mind and feeling each other's energy. I mean, I think that you can have varying degrees with that. There's nuance based on where you're both at. And I don't think that we can sustainably have anything that we haven't built the muscles to receive. And so that's the main thing, is like, and I think we said this earlier, right? It's like there's some muscle, like the trust muscle, and you have to build that And then once it's built, you might still need to like flex it now and then, but there's a certain way, and this is what embodiment really is to me, is like to become embodied in something that you've been conditioned in an opposite way, right? Like all of our cultural programming and societal conditioning, all of these things, right? It's like we're conditioned to withhold or not speak the truth because we fear we might lose connection because of it. And so it's like, wow, if you really want to devote yourself to authenticity, there's going to be certain things that you have to actively train your attention and actively show up for. And it's like a practice. It's like that is your dojo, right? To like start speaking your truth in this place that it really scares you, or to like actually share your love when you would sooner or have for the rest of your life withheld it to try and control someone, right? To do the opposite of this conditioning, you actively practice it for however long you need to until, and like you might say, build the new neural pathways, or like actually that posture becomes the way that you hold yourself and walk. Just the idea that like these things need to be an active practice before they're embodied. And then there's always a next, like, and this is like, again, it's like the spot, the love and the truth, where they want to collide and where they want to bring us in our walk of evolution is going to change. And then it's like, okay, what's my next practice? Where's my next dojo?
Mhm.
Something that feels really related to this is your assertions that we are in a time in which we're moving from vulnerability to transparency. Because I think that, so much of this is related to like, are we willing to show up in our co-creation with God as transparent? And I think that distinction is so rich, and I would love for you to explicate your feelings on that distinction.
Yeah. So it really tracks along what we've already covered of like this, like vulnerability is in the paradigm of needs. It's in the paradigm of survival, right? And then the paradigm up here is desire. It's thriving. It's transparency. And there's a big difference. So sometimes, like, because if you look in the post that Alyssa's referring to, it's pinned on my profile right now. And I actually like used the dictionary definitions of like vulnerability essentially means that you're open to being hurt, that there's like that you are in an unsafe position, right? And so that's why we've covered safety. How perfect. Versus transparency is just like you have nothing to hide. There's nothing about having nothing to hide that suggests I'll be hurt or has me in a position that's not safe. And so that's how I see that, just mapping and tracking along everything we've already talked about. And part of why I wrote that is because there is a way that a lot of times vulnerability, the way I see it at like an auric and energetic level, is like there's like actually like a tear or a hold or a hook at this like auric and energetic level that comes with vulnerability, versus transparency is more so like you're in your electromagnetic field, I'm in my electromagnetic field, and we're just like seeing each other playing together, right? And I'm not trying to like hook you in, or I'm not like opening myself for you to come in to my field, right? It's like I actually respect your sovereign bubble, and like I'm here in my sovereign bubble, and I'm fully available and connectable from that place. There's not like courting, like like courting in the same way. And again, it's like, just like sometimes you will feel unsafe. Sometimes you will go into a trauma response. You're not going to be regulated 100% of the time. It's not about perfection. It's just about like, what domain are you oriented to and choosing to spend the majority of your time in to the best of your ability.
Yeah, and the posture we hold as well, like through our frequency. I mean, the point is to be human, so it's not going to be completely regulated all the time. Where's the learning in that?
Yeah. Well, I would say the point is to really integrate your humanity and your divinity.
Yeah, totally.
So I feel like I could talk for hours with you, Hannah, and everything is such a juicy window into your gifts and offerings. I'd love to invite you to share. Where can people work with you? Where can people find you? What do you have on offer right now?
Yeah, so the best place to connect with me is on Instagram. I'm sure that that will be in the show notes. Another fun place to connect is I do have a Substack called the Eros Diaries. And so if in particular you felt enlivened around this conversation about orgasm and sexuality, that is my like uncensored space where I share that. So I recommend that. And Triunity Temple is a membership that my beloved and I have that is really in service to the unfoldment of heaven on earth. And we share a lot about the organic architecture of relationships and of alchemical union. So those are like the ground level entry ways. Following me on Instagram, you'll get a lot from that. And if you want to go, if you feel a pulse to go deeper, then private spaces. My signature group journey is called Erotic Alchemy. And I also have two one-on-one pathways, one which is all Voxer and it's called Naked. And that's really for the woman who is self-led in the sense that that is a mat, that is a practice space for you to come and unfurl and map moment to moment, like how energy is moving through your system. If you feel like there's something you're not seeing, or there's a way that like, you're wanting to evolve and transform, like you bring that to the space. So I really have recently, it's been important for me to differentiate, like Naked is this all Voxer space where that's how it goes. We can go anywhere and there's no time limits, no depth limits at all, but it's up to you, right? So this is for someone who wants to practice their responsibility to bring the thing. I don't do digging in that container. And then if you want more of like me to really be in real time and space with you and have sessions in a one-on-one capacity, that would be Wild and Holy. And that is where I will do a lot more of the heavy lifting. And, of course, your participation is fully required. And that's a beautiful space. Sessions are really powerful, really, really powerful. And it's more for the person who wants to show up and receive.
Beautiful. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Do you have any closing thoughts, Sheena or Hannah? Anything that wants to flow through into this space as we close up?
Thank you for being here. Thank you for the conversation. Thank you for everything. It's all been so perfect. And I just loved being in this space with you so much.
Yeah. I loved how how much of a spiral we really went on and how perfectly that reflects this journey, right? We're always going layers deeper and layers higher around this spiral. And so it felt like this beautiful circular, but it's actually a spiral because we're deepening and because we're going higher. And, I still feel like this was just the beginning.
Absolutely.
It's like the iceberg, right? There's so much more here and I can sense it. It feels complete for now. There's some processing, but I definitely feel that there's a lot more here that wants to be shared through you and in this space. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just a little teaser. We look forward to in a future episode welcoming Hannah and her beloved Clay on to talk into sacred commerce and the sovereign. How would you describe that kind of way of
With the temple?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it is, actualization of our spiritual sovereignty into this material realm.
Yeah. So excited for that one. And stay tuned. Thank you so much, Hannah.
Thank you
for being here.